back to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, the podcast where we explore the stories, science, and soul of emotional well being. I'm your host, Avik, and today we are diving into a topic that's deeply personal and profoundly transformative, which is writing as a way to heal. So, joining me is a lovely guest. Please welcome John DeDakis. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Amazing. And dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion today, I'll quickly love to introduce you with John. So, John is a journalist, novelist, and writing coach whose remarkable career spans 45 years in journalism, including uh, 25 years at CNN, where he worked as the editor on the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. So he's interviewed presidents like Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter, covered the White House, and even been tear gassed while covering a ad. But it's not just his journalism that defines him, but it's his humanity. After losing his sister to suicide and his son to a heroin overdose, he turned to writing, not just as a expression, but as a survival.
Mm.
Those experiences now pulse through the veins of his six award winning mystery thriller novels. Each each one proved that words can turn pain into the purpose. And today John helps aspiring writers find their voice and guides those grieving towards the page. Because sometimes healing begins with a single sentence.
Mm.
So why to wait? Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you.
Amazing. Uh, John, your fiction is built on the personal loss and the real emotion. So, when did you realize that writing wasn't just a storytelling, it was a form of self therapy?
I don't think I realized it until after I'd been writing for a long time. When I first started writing, it was just to tell a story, to want to be a novelist and want to have written a book that would get published. And so I immediately began drawing from personal experience. And of course, the dramatic experience of my sister's suicide. I also witnessed a car train collision when I was 9 years old. And so those two events became the foundation for the first novel. But I don't think I realized, you asked when I realized that I was writing as a way to heal. I don't think I realized that until I looked back several years later and saw that there was a trend, that grief and loss undergirded all of the stories. And then I could see that it was a catharsis to be able to write about these things, and it was therapeutic.
Understood. So, um, what did those early pages look like for you? The messy, angry, numb. How did they evolve into meaning? So, what do you have to say?
As I say, I don't know if I was really writing as a form of healing. And so the first drafts, they weren't necessarily so much raw emotion as they were just clumsy storytelling. And
Okay.
so one of the things I learned, and it took 10 years to get the agent that I've got, but during that process, I learned a lot more about how to write a story effectively. And I learned to deconstruct the process so that what I ended up doing was, in addition to writing novels, helping other people write their novel, doing some writing coaching and manuscript editing. So, the messiness wasn't so much the emotions on the page as it was just the difficulty of learning how to write fiction when all my life I'd been writing nonfiction and journalism.
Exactly. So, okay, like, it's so powerful. It reminds me that healing does not always begin in the clarity, but sometimes in chaos as well. So, exactly. And like you spent decades in journalism, structured, factual, deadline driven world. So, how did you transition from reporting reality to writing fiction that explores the inner truth and also about the emotion?
The transition happened when CNN made me an editor. I had been a writer, and before I joined CNN, I'd been a White House correspondent and a reporter. And so when I became an editor, that was tedious. It was fault finding, but it paid well. And so that's when I began to give myself permission to start making things up. And the thing I discovered is that journalism was a good training ground for the kind of writing I was doing because journalism, by definition, needs to be clear and it needs to be succinct. Whether you're writing a story in a newspaper or for the eye or for broadcast for the ear, you only have so much time and space, and you need to really be efficient in the way you tell a story. And that's true even if you're writing an 80,000 word book. Each sentence still needs to be efficient and succinct. And so journalism was just a good training ground for writing in a clear way.
Exactly. So, I mean, does the discipline from your newsroom days ever collide with kind of the vulnerability of writing from pain?
I don't know, because the way I write is fairly. I mean, I procrastinate a lot, which you don't have the luxury of doing as a journalist. You're on a deadline. You can't just sit there and wait for the muse to show up. But now that I'm no longer a journalist, I don't have to worry about deadlines, and and I think though that the one thing that does keep me centered is journaling. I journal every morning, pretty much to look at the events of the day before, but usually those entries allow me some time to analyze my life and ruminate and think about things that are going on. And often that does involve processing emotions of one sort or another. So I suppose the discipline, if there is one, is just the desire to live a meaningful life, to be able to analyze my life and to tell and to try to discern how well I'm doing as a human being.
Hmm, that's great to hear. I mean, that's a balance. I mean, the structure and surrender. Uh,
Right. Right.
Lovely. And also, like, you have shared that it took 10 years, like 14 major revisions and 39 queries to land your first agent. So, how did the persistence and patience became kind of the part of your emotional healing and not just a kind of writing journey?
I think that the connection is that writing is very psychological. And I
Okay.
think that the best writers are the ones who know themselves the best.
Mhm.
And so part of my makeup is to be the best that I can be. And then
Mhm.
and when it came to writing novels, I wanted to, do as good a job as I could in order to get published traditionally. And so I think that the connection was persistence, persistence that um, was focused on becoming better, was involved in becoming a better writer, and I think consequently a more self-aware person. So it was that steadiness, that forward moving toward a goal that I think made the difference.
Okay. Okay. So, um, I mean, what would you say to a kind of writer? Maybe the budding writer, or maybe the advanced writer, or a person who feels like they have failed too many times to start again.
Oh man, that's I think a pretty common feeling, failure, and
Yeah.
and then that coupled with fear. The more daunting the future looks, the more reluctant you are to face your fears. And so my advice is to move toward the pain and do your, because our society tends to want to anesthetize the pain, and fear is a very powerful and can be a very debilitating emotion. But I think if we lean back and try to analyze why it is we're afraid, if we're afraid of failure or being judged or not being perfect, those are valid things to be afraid of. But at the same time, we've been judged, we have failed, we're not perfect. And so I think that when we recognize that even though the fears are valid, the reality isn't always nearly as bad as we anticipate. And so I think that the secret is to face our fears and to go forward in spite of our fears. It's almost like harnessing the fear, because I think that when we do that, the byproduct is confidence. The byproduct is courage. It doesn't come as a result of just sitting back and waiting for it to happen. It means that you have to take action. And in so doing, you will become a stronger person because of it.
Hmm. Yeah. So, wow. I mean, that's the truth of resilience. I mean, isn't it? I mean, what do
I
you
think
think?
so. Yeah, I think very much so. I mean, resilience is just the continuing to go forward in spite of the resistance. Resilience is forward motion facing resistance, I think.
Exactly. Exactly. Uh, and like healing and success are definitely both kind of endurance and yeah, like you just keep showing up and one draft at a time. So it's great. Yeah.
I think so, because then when you look back at it, you can see where you've been. I hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu in Peru,
Oh,
and it was 5 days, 20, how many, 25 miles and 15,000 feet, and it was really tough. And the what was hard is when you would look into the distance and see how much you had ahead of you. And so the way I was able to do it was just get my head down one step at a time. And pretty soon you've reached a goal and you look back and see how far you've come. And that's exhilarating.
exactly. Exactly true. And like, what have you learned about the human mind? I mean, from your perspective, like through the act of writing.
Whoa. One of the things I've learned, and this was a surprise to me, and it's something that I incorporate in the writing classes I teach, I call it the spooky power of the subconscious. And that means that I think that the more we allow ourselves to engage with the rest of the world and get to know people who aren't just like us, they're people of different races, ethnicity, different ages, genders, all those different things, the more we accumulate in our reservoir of creativity, those experiences we learn from other people. And so, what I suggest to my writers is, or my students, is to, when they're beginning to write a book, interview one of the characters, almost like a job interview. Who are you and why do you want to be in my book? And that question stirs things up. It's like dipping a straw into your subconscious. And then as you, as that voice shows up and answers the question, the story comes through your fingers and onto the page. It's, it's, it's spooky that way, but it really happens. And so that's what I understand about relating the human mind to the act of writing. They're very similar, but in a sense, the act of writing, if you do it the way I'm suggesting, bypasses your mind and allows you to access things that are even deeper. And it's only later in the rewrite process that you use that analytical side of your brain to make your story more coherent.
Wow. So, like, if you can share one journaling or maybe the writing exercise that helps someone to begin processing the grief safely.
There are a number of writing prompts. If you've lost, and grief, just to be clear, doesn't necessarily mean the loss of a loved one. That's certainly, I think, a strong dimension, but it could be the loss of a pet or a job or a relationship or your
Mhm.
health or your innocence. Any one of those things. My suggestion would be to start with just the two words, I feel, and then just
Okay.
keep writing. Set a timer for, say, 10 minutes, not real long, and just write. And don't pick up the pen. Whatever pops into your head, just write it down. Um, don't pause to make it pretty or writerly or literary. Just keep
Mhm.
writing. And I think that that frees, and the more you do that, you're not writing for publication at this point. You're just writing to access what's that turmoil that's inside of you. I'll say one quick thing and then I'll stop. There was a guy who was taking my memoir writing class, and he was writing a story about the death of his wife. And he said in order to research that, he went back to his journal that he was keeping when his wife was sick and when she died. And he told me, I forgot how angry I was. And that tells me that the act of writing, it was in a sense a mercy because it allowed him to siphon those tumultuous emotions and get them onto the page. And in so doing, it freed him to move on with his life. And it wasn't until he went back that he was reminded of how he felt at the time.
Wow. So that's really beautiful, I'd say. And any advice you'd like to share with the listeners
About what?
about who's starting their journey into writing and what things they need to focus on?
Woof. Well, I think first is to recognize that you have a story to tell, that you have a desire to tell a story. It's not that you feel like you should write a story, it's that you continue to think about writing it and wanting to write it. And I think that
Mhm.
when you recognize that, the next step is to start doing writing exercises that are designed to help you identify what your story is or and who the people are who are in your story. If you already have an idea for a story, then my suggestion is to go to writers' conferences because that's where you'll meet potential agents. You'll meet writers who have become published authors. That means there'll be writing workshops and lectures that will help you learn your craft and learn about the business. And I
Mhm.
encourage you to share your work with other people to get their feedback. Join a writing group or get take classes that will enable you to better understand the process and get better at it. So there are many things that you can do along the way just to get started, and then I think momentum will carry you the rest of the way.
Wow, that's amazing. So, John, thank you so much for reminding us that healing is not a kind of erasing pain. It's all about rewriting our relationship with it.
That's
So,
right.
uh, through your words, you show that stories don't just entertain, but they rescue, right? So, for anyone who is listening, who's lost someone or lost themselves, please remember that writing is not just about being perfect on paper. It's all about finding peace between the lines.
Perfect. Nicely said.
Yeah. So, if this episode moved you, share it with someone who's grieving or kind of dreaming of writing their story. Because the words that we write, maybe the light uh, someone else needs to find their way home, right? So, John, if someone wants to connect with you, what would be the great medium to connect?
Best way is through my website, which is my name.com. I'll spell it. It's johndedakis.com. JOHN, D as in dog, E, D as in dog, A,
Mhm.
KIS as in Sam, John DeDakis.com.
Amazing. Dear listeners, I'll put all the links and details into the show notes for your easy reference. And with this hope, I'm your host Avik, and this is Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, where healing begins with honesty and hope finds its voice. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.